Welcome everyone. Today we are going to be exploring silos at scale, taking a look at how local AI efficiency gains are breaking quality feedback loops. Now, what we mean by that, we're going to a little bit more detail in a moment. But first, I will introduce myself. So my name is Mike Mead, and I'm Chief Product and Technology Officer at the Scale Factory. We're part of Ten10 Group. And Ten10 is a consultancy specializing in AI, data, cloud, quality engineering, and automation. Today, I'm joined by Stu and James, and we're going to run a fireside chat to dig into the topic. But before we do, I'll let them introduce themselves. So, Stu, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Hey everyone, so I'm Stu Day. I've recently joined Blue Light Card as quality lead, and AI adoption is something that we're starting our journey on at the moment. So I'm really excited to have this conversation and talk around this a bit more.
Thanks, Stu. And James?
Hi everyone, I'm James Stubbs. I'm a principal consultant at Ten10, and currently having a lot of conversations with our clients about the art of the possible with AI and how that might better help them with their quality tool sets.
Thanks, James. Cool. So let's have a bit of a scene set. So up on the screen, I've got an overview of the software delivery lifecycle phases, and you'll probably recognize some, if not all of these. And in your role, or in the in your organization, you might work in one or more of these areas. And so what we're going to be talking about today is broadly the impact of AI on essentially every single one of these phases, right from ideation and discovery, right the way through to how software is developed, tested, put into production, monitored, observed, and then maintained and updated and upgraded going forward. And when we're talking about local AI efficiency gains, effectively what we're referring to is the efficiency gains within one of these areas and what the impact of that might be. The other thing I've got on the slide here is sort of an AI adoption maturity chart. And what as we go into the discussion today, and we're going to take questions as we go through. So if you've got any questions about stuff, do feel free to ask. Just seed one thought really for you to hold, and that's have a think about where you are, either in your role individually or your organization, in your AI adoption maturity. And then, so that might be from like no AI used all the way through to full AI augmentation or somewhere in between. And think about where that maturity sits in each specific area. So, for example, do you have the same level of AI maturity in incident management and triaging bugs in production as you do in developing software, or is there a difference between those? So hopefully this serves as a bit of a scene set and gives you a bit of context for the discussion today. The other thing that we're gonna be digging into really, and this is the sort of crux of it really, is what I'd like to call the optimization paradox. So three things up here to set the scene. And what we've got is, if we think about optimization isolation, so thinking about those phases in the software delivery lifecycle, if developers are using, say, Claude Code to ship faster, to generate and create code faster, and you've got quality engineers using AI automation to do testing at scale, like generating test cases and so on. And you've got maybe operators, so like SRE or DevOps engineers or cloud engineers running the software in production, and they're using some monitoring software that's got some AI insights being surfaced. All of these things are happening in isolation. And the conversation we're going to have today is sort of exploring that and looking to see, where there are fragmented feedback loops. So let's say, for example, you've got developers generating AI artifacts. It's just kind of shifting the bottleneck elsewhere. And then the other thing that we're going to explore is potentially like what is the new. So a lot of things are changing around us, new tools, new roles, new processes emerging. Where do we think things are going? And what do we think might win? Hopefully that gives you a bit of a scene set. So we're going to open up to the fireside now, I've got some, have Stu and James answer some questions, and we'll have a bit of a discussion around stuff. But as we're talking, if you've got any questions, please do feel free to use the Q&A button in Zoom. You'll find it on the Zoom bar. Click that button and pop your questions in there. And also feel free to use the chat as well. If you post any questions there, we'll pull them through to the Q&A, and then we'll answer them as we go along. And if we don't quite get around to it, then we'll go through the questions at the end. So hopefully that will make sense. I'm going to stop sharing these slides, and let's have a bit of a discussion around this. So I guess to open up really, Stu, I'd like your thoughts on what you're seeing out there in the wild, either in the wider industry or within your organization.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I think there's two parts to it. So as I mentioned before, I've just joined Blue Light as quality lead, and AI adoption is something that we're really keen on maturing and such like. And it's already been interesting because there's a real keenness to adopt it and use it. And we're talking now about how we do that. What sort of guardrails do we need to put in place? These things. And what I'm hearing a lot out in the industry is that this pace that people want to move at is common across the board. And because of the investment in AI, organizations are really, really keen to adopt and implement as quickly as they possibly can to try and drive efficiency gains. Now, what that seems to be doing in a number of cases is that these efficiency gains are being very focused in isolation, so within a discipline. So, for example, our software engineers within our organizations are thinking about how they can accelerate what they do. And then our product teams are doing the same, our operations teams are doing the same, but it doesn't feel like there's this joined up thinking around, if we do this here, what's the ripple effect? And actually what problems are we really trying to solve as well? So we're hearing a lot about, efficiency gains being in single disciplines, but not across the full delivery life cycle. And the impact that we're seeing there is as well that some organizations are treating AI as a replacement to people, which is having a real impact. And we're seeing this a lot in the quality engineering space with a lot of people, now on the job market because, essentially organizations have made these decisions. So it isn't just about, the impact isn't just about what we're seeing from a technology and delivery perspective. It's also having an impact on people's lives as well, and careers and such like. And I know we're going to touch more on sort of roles and skills and stuff as we move through, but that the blast radius that I'm seeing and I'm hearing and I'm feeling is quite vast right now.
Yeah. Okay. And it's really hard to sort of put a pin on things. But would you say that we are still at the early stages of this shift, or are we a fair way along now? Like, is some things settling down, or is it still very much up in the air?
I was having a conversation yesterday around this actually, that there aren't any AI experts, in my opinion, and because everybody's still learning, everybody's still experimenting, and I feel like we've still got a long way to go to really understand how we use this technology and embed it and augment into what we do on a day-to-day basis, rather than thinking it's a replacement for something. And we've seen these things in the past, especially within quality engineering and software testing, where sort of 10 years ago, there was a huge demand for automation, and you started seeing like individual teams being spun up to automate things, and that would then get offshored, but you'd lose the connection between what it was you were trying to build and the business purpose, and it was more about output rather than outcomes. And I feel like at the moment we're kind of in that same period where we're trying to figure out how we balance outputs and connect them to outcomes and augment what we want to do. And I still think we've got ways to go with that. The tooling and the technology is moving at pace, and I think that's the other challenge,
Mm.
right? Because you just sort of get to grips with something, and you're like, oh, now there's something else, and do we use that or don't we use that? Or so I think, yeah, I think it's going to be a bit of a roller coaster still, but I think we've still got a long way to go to settle into how we best use this tooling and technology.
Yeah, yeah, okay. I think like what you said there, I think really, really struck a chord with me. Output versus outcomes. A lot of conversations
Mm.
do seem to be very focused on output. How many tokens are being used, what is being generated versus are we delivering the right outcomes? Like what outcome are we hitting? So I think I'm going to try and hold that thought and see if we can come back to that in the end and see where this conversation goes. I mean, James, what's your perspective on things? Do you have anything to add to that from what you're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a bit of a mindset shift, isn't it? We saw this with, everyone shifting to agile, and then everyone's shifting to a DevOps mindset, and now this is a new mindset shift. I don't think we're quite there yet in terms of maturity of that mindset, and I think different teams are at different places with it. We've got extremes, we've got small startup teams moving really fast, and potentially quality suffering as a consequence, but they're at a scale where they can deal with that. We've also got larger organizations we're talking to who are a bit more fearful to actually dip their toes in the water, and they might not be very far with their AI journey at all. Um, One of the main things I think is that's really key is we used to spend a lot of time talking about briefs, BAs really refining requirements, and the teams talking a lot about features before they were even started. And now that's going the other way, where things are kind of expected this morning to have been delivered. With that sort of crunch time really lessening, it's really interesting how people are handling it. And one of the main questions we get asked a lot at the moment is, how do we deal with this? All our developers are working so much faster, and yet we've got the same amount of QAs. So the shift in the mindset from quality assurance to quality engineering is really important, and we want to help people to do that with the right tools and mindsets for those quality teams as well. So I think, yeah, it's a bit of a shift that we're seeing, but yeah, there's a lot of changes happening right now.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Now that's interesting. I think on the sort of note of so you talk about the amount of code being written, developed, right? The amount of code being developed has increased significantly. Whether that be purely AI generated or AI augmenting a developer or something. But the quality engineering or the quality assurance capacity has sort of remained the same and sort of creating a bottleneck there. I mean, do you see so I'm gonna pick on you, Stu, for this one first. But do you sort of feel or do you see that would have an impact on the overall quality of software being delivered? Like, are we just getting more stuff at a lower quality, or we maintain that bar?
So I know that this is about AI, but I'm going to remove AI from this conversation just for a moment because I think that especially over the last number of years, maybe in the last decade, a lot of what the focus has been on has been about speed and how do we get faster at what we do. And we've always fought this battle about trying to find that balance between speed and delivering overall quality in the outcomes that we achieve. And we've evolved how we think, we've evolved how we kind of ways of working, we've evolved how we test. We've talked about shift left, we've talked about continuous quality throughout the entire life cycle. But the fact remains, everything is still very much focused on how do we improve speed, and speed. So when you're bringing in AI and you're sort of 10 timesing the amount of code you can write at any given time, not just the code, but the other aspects of potentially what we do throughout the delivery cycle, there's a natural impact on quality or the potential impact on quality because we've come from having more deterministic outcomes to non-deterministic. So you're having to put a lot of trust and oversight into the output of the AI. This is where prompt engineering is so key as well, and understanding how to manipulate the AI to do the things that you want it to do. So if you've got a system, if you're working within a system already that maybe isn't very mature in its quality engineering and continuous quality mindset and culture, this is massively going to expose quality issues, because it's going to accelerate the issues that you already have and expose them tenfold. Now
Yeah, yeah,
that could be a really good thing, right? Because it can surface things a lot quicker. But what you'll see there is you'll start seeing a lot more noise, a lot more chaos, a lot more reactive nature to these things. So I think part of that is very much understanding where you are right now, and that kind of will be an indicator as to what the impact on overall quality could potentially be. When
yeah.
you're doing this.
Can I
That
jump
does,
in for
yeah, that does make sense. Yeah,
because
yeah. Go on, James.
I do agree. I agree with all your points, Stu. And I think one of the main things that we need to do now is make sure that whenever we're starting to develop software, the key thing is really kind of, ironclad, human defined acceptance criteria that can anchor the AI's outputs into reality. And that's kind of really, it should be at the core of any new project now, is making sure that's defined. And that can be a resurgence of test driven development, behavior driven development, and also kind of the new child of AI, which is spec driven development, which is just really ensuring that those requirements are kind of the key thing. Because if those aren't met, then what are we creating? We're just creating content, for the sake of it. I think really making sure that what's actually created is what we want. Like you say, is the product quality there? That has to be kind of the key thing, that we're making those outcomes clear to the AI before we go and start relying upon it. And then there's a real focus on, like you say, CI, CD, and quality gating now, making sure those quality gates are really rooted in exactly what we expect. So expectation, clearly defined expectations becomes a real key issue, and we should know exactly what we want to be delivered, and we need to tell any LLMs we're going to work with that exactly what we want before we go about starting to create things. Because vibe coding is a very fun iterative process, but really for enterprise level software development, we should already know what we want to build before we start doing it.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's really interesting, really, because one of the things that I've sort of been looking at and exploring is this sort of shift from, I guess, in a world where we're thinking lean, and so you've got so much engineering capacity, and so within a quarter or within a year, the feature roadmap is constrained, right? You can only do so many things, and so an organization has to put a lot of thought into what features should we prioritize, what should we be adding. Whereas now it feels in some areas it's unconstrained. It's like unlimited. Like, let's have all of the features, let's do all of the things, and um, you don't put the you don't have to put in that upfront effort to say, okay, what's the feature we're developing? Why are we doing it? Let's do the market research. Let's speak to the end users, because you can just throw everything out there. And I do wonder if in a few years' time we're going to look back and reflect at massively bloated code bases filled with features and things that have been added by AI that aren't really that valuable. And that we've lost the business context for, like, why we added that thing in the first place. Um,
Hey, can I just pick up on that,
yeah,
like, if I may, because that it's a really important point, and you know, often when we talk about QA and quality engineering, people's minds go straight to testing still, right? The testing elements of what we do, but understanding our customers and understanding that we are building something that's going to add value to the customer and it has a purpose behind why we're building it is hugely important. And it's that doesn't go away regardless of whether we can churn code out and do testing quicker. We can, all we're going to end up doing is building things that don't matter,
mm,
right? So all these efficiency gains that we're potentially striving for by using AI and LLMs at different stages of the life cycle, you start losing that because you're just churning out stuff that ultimately isn't of any value to your customer, or in our case, to our members. So we spend a lot of time researching, interviewing members, getting information back, and then feeding that back in. you can't not do that. So if you really want to be gaining those efficiencies, you need to still have that research and understanding and connecting with your customers to really feel the benefit. In my opinion, so
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
The question is that are we at a kind of paradigm shift where instead we focus instead on live user testing of features and we just throw all the features out, like you say there, Mike, and then we
mm,
start live testing them and see what actually gets used. And then we have more of a focus on
yeah,
telemetry going
Yeah.
forward rather
yeah,
than taking a lot of time and usability up front, and actually we just live user test everything and start red green testing everything. So this could be like a bit of a change in the way that we do things going forward, really. If features and code becomes really cheap, then there's a question of, is that sustainable? Will that continue to be the case going forward? But we can get to that a bit later, I'm sure.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a very, very interesting thought there. And I do like the idea of, you know, being quite agile, being very experimental, getting something in front of the customer as quickly as possible. And so actually, if the cost to get a POC or MVP out there is significantly reduced, um, why not do that? But then I think we still need to come back to, once that feature has proved its worth, it then needs to be like um, taken from that POC or MVP, that limited, test case where you've put it in front of a handful of customers, and then maybe even redevelop from scratch. Like, we bin it, we've proved that idea works. Now let's bin the vibe coded thing, and let's build it properly. I don't know. I think that's a really interesting thought there. So I guess, like, we've talked a little bit about, whether maybe we see things maybe straying off in sort of a wrong direction and maybe where we should be focused on. But I think, Stu, you were talking about AI having a positive impact briefly. Maybe we should dig into that a bit more and see, like, where bringing AI into elements of the software delivery lifecycle can have a really positive impact on our day to day. Let's have a think about that.
shall I go, James? Do you
Yeah,
want to
yeah.
go?
No.
Yeah. I think first of all, as I mentioned earlier, one of the things it allows us to do is build and get feedback quickly, right? So if and I want to pick up on just very quickly the word maturity. So what is our AI maturity? Well, what does it need to be? And I think that's still something that organizations need to figure out as well. But as you sort of adopt AI, you need to understand what the clear problems are you're trying to solve. And I think that allows us to move quicker and sort of try and address those problems. But by trying to address those problems, we may expose other things. Now that's good, right? Exposing issues within your system, quality issues within your system, your processes. You'll potentially be able to do that a lot quicker than we've ever been able to do before. So that for me is a real positive. And I think also the other real positive is it's enabling people to get closer to technology and without as many constraints or fear of doing things. So using LLMs to help you generate code, generate tests, whatever that looks like, even using it as a partner to ask you questions. So if you're trying to define something that you need to figure out, what sort of test do I need to run for this change, you can interact with your LLM and you get it to ask you questions and like maybe come up with some things or questions that you hadn't even considered, right? And I think that's really important because especially from a QE perspective, because often you're outnumbered tenfold in a team, right? You may have one, you may have two QEs, you may have 8, 9, 10 developers, of different skill sets. And if you don't really have many people to bounce ideas off, it adds another sort of partner to be able to do that. And I think that's potentially really positive that we can take away and start leveraging more, even if we're not using it to write tests, write code. How do we use it as a partner to augment our thinking, right? Not necessarily our technical implementation, but just our thinking in general. I think that could be a massive benefit to us.
Yeah, like being an assistant or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on that, James? Anything to add?
Yeah, obviously, there's loads of benefits. I think we see the pace as a big one, especially in things like rapid prototyping, where you just want to knock up a tool and see if it's useful, and maybe there's something specific I'm trying to do. Something doesn't exist at the moment. Well, why don't I just have a crack at it myself? That becomes less of a side project and more of a quick and easy task that I can do before I dive into the main project. So, things that are repetitive tasks we can now automate quite easily with things like low code automation, and there's a whole heap of things that we can say that productivity wise it's great for us. I think what we need to do in terms of being careful is just making sure that we don't um, take away some of the core processes we've gained over such a long period of time of refinement, and actually in the way that we build software, where I think we've all agreed on a pretty good way of doing it over the last 25 years. Now, we don't want all of those things to go in the bin. They're still the core of the way we should be doing things. But what we need to do is set the correct guardrails to allow these new tools to help us to do things in a faster and essentially more accessible way. Because now a BA can go and have an idea and then try and take that through to implementation if they want to. I think the amount of people who will be coming up with their own applications is not just limited to developers. There'll be people, from VCs with a bit of cash going and see if they can do it for themselves with a bit of Claude code. So I think it's going to be a change to the landscape, and hopefully, the main thing is that we don't lose sight of what's really important in software development, and we keep the quality standards really high and all of the good processes that we've learned over the years. But we put that in place with an additional AI toolset to help us reach new productivity gains. And in that way, we'll be able to come into customers who maybe have large amounts of technical debt and clean that up a lot quicker for them than we would do otherwise, with the help of AI analysis of the code base, and then some help in the implementation as well. I think expertise remains really important for us, and we need to not forget, what has made us good at our jobs. It's that we're experts in our areas, but we can frame AI within that expert context to help it achieve what we want to.
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree with that. I think our what we bring as practitioners is our expertise and experience, and the business context and our knowledge and all of that coming together, to I guess keep AI under reins. So it's not going off and like generating stuff, but also what is maybe AI generated, we can then look at that critically and say, okay, actually, is this acceptable or not? And so, I mean, you talked about business analysts. I've seen project managers knock together applications. I myself have as well. I don't get to have that hands on these days, but I certainly have used Claude Code to be like, you know what, I want to convey an idea to a team to get them to go off and build something. I could write a specification, but actually, really small application. Let's just vibe code a bit of Python and then throw that over to them to like convey an idea on the expectation that they would throw it away and start getting. But you can really see the real benefit of it. And obviously, I'm looking at the code going, this is nowhere near production ready. It's just to convey an idea. But to sort of shift the conversation a little bit into like seeing like the other side, like where it could go wrong, I think I've got the experience to know that that's not production ready. Like I haven't thought about security, I haven't thought about scalability or testing or anything like that. Um, but somebody else who doesn't have experience in software engineering as a whole isn't going to know that. The whole works on my machine, like it's running on my laptop. Surely it can't be that hard to get it up in the cloud and in production. It's that like gap in understanding, I guess. I mean, Stu, have you got any thoughts on or insights into like where the sort of unhappy path of things?
Um, yeah, I mean, we touched on some in the opening conversation. I think I want to pick up on your point there, Mike, around having that foundational knowledge to know when something is good enough or not good enough and why it's actually created it in that way. Um, and I think that, like, coming back to James's point, that's where those foundational skills are more relevant than ever. And if I look at organizations that are heavily reliant on grads coming in and using grad schemes to bolster their engineering capabilities and such like, I think it's going to be a really interesting dynamic as we move forward to understand. And this kind of goes back to the educational system side of it. When people are doing their computer science degrees, how are they being taught about AI? Are they still getting that foundational knowledge within their degree that they need? And then AI is being taught as an augmentation to that, or a bolt on? Or are they learning with AI and therefore maybe not getting the same level of understanding and grounding and scars that everybody else has had over the years, which then puts them in a better position to be able to challenge some of those things that AI may be outputting, right? So I think that's going to be really interesting moving forward. And if we need to make sure that people are always understanding the why are we doing this and why has it done this, because if you don't have that understanding, then coming back to what we were saying about code bloat and all this sort of thing, it's going to create a horrible mess within organizations, and it won't be sustainable. It won't be maintainable. And the quality in that sense will start dipping more and more. So I think
Yeah,
that
yeah,
for me, like a slightly different spin on that because of those foundational skills.
yeah. Okay, okay. No, that does make sense. Anything, James? Any thoughts from
Um,
you?
yeah, I mean, obviously, it's a worry, isn't it? Because the like I say that accessibility side of things is really powerful, and it allows us to you know go in with an area we don't have skills in and actually start to upskill very quickly, start building things and playing with it from day one with the help of AI, right? So if there is an area, I think, let's say I wanted to create a Rust application and I've never coded in Rust before, well, AI will help me get started with that. But I think there's also the other side of things where people are coming straight out of university. They haven't had those jobs within software engineering before. And then their experiences from day one, they're getting started with Claude Code or using GitHub Copilot and not really writing much code of their own. And then it becomes about are they still getting all the fundamentals they need to in a software engineering role to really progress themselves? So I think having the core software engineering mindset and also building those skills yourself alongside AI as a useful tool is really the way to go with it. I think this kind of rise in what they're now calling dark code, where it's code that no one's actually read and it's found its way into production data, production repositories everywhere, is a problem because that this is the sort of code that's going to break in the middle of the night and no one has actually read it or understands it, and we're going to have someone woken up by alerts going off and a complete inability to fix it without so I think that's going to be a change we haven't really seen before, is code that absolutely no one knows how it works except for the AI that wrote it in the first place. That's why these guardrails are really important, that we make sure quality gating becomes more of it's always been an important theme of moving quickly, as you mentioned earlier. That's been what we've aimed to do over the last 10 years is allow ourselves to move really quickly. Well, now it's also allow ourselves not to break everything by pushing code that we haven't thoroughly read. And I think a lot of the job as a software engineer in those cases moves to code review, and reading of code is going to have to be really important. People will spend a lot more time reading code than they will writing it when they're working in very AI heavy environments. So
Yeah,
yeah, it's a slightly different environment than we would have worked in at the start of our careers.
yeah. I've seen that shift a lot. The software developers moving from writing to reviewing AI generated code, by and large, with typical setup. I see software engineer has one kind of agentic workflow. I don't know, GitHub Copilot or something, going off and generating some code to solve a problem, and then using another model to check that. So having two kind of tools or two things running in parallel, and then the job as the software engineer is prompting those, making sure, feeding in the right kind of context and guidance for those, and then reviewing the output before that goes to a pull request or merge request for then another software engineer to review. Yeah, and the unhappy case is someone just takes the output and then throws it into a pull request. And so somebody is reviewing code that the author hasn't written or hasn't even read properly. And that's a real problem.
And I think, Mike, on that is
Mm,
the big thing that we're really needing to think about is risk of the things that we're doing. And we talk about a lot about risk-based testing and how we're actually identifying risk of code that hasn't been written by somebody starts becoming a challenge as well. And it's not just the code; it's other aspects of where we embed AI. What potential risks can this introduce by us going quicker? What potential risk can this introduce by not having as many people involved, for example? And I think that's something that's going to become more known as we progress more and organizations have more war stories to share, um, in terms of how are they able to manage and identify, and that's risk at all levels, right? Organizational through to code and everything in between. And I think that's going to be an interesting area to be thinking about as we move forward.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Sorry, James.
I was going to say, I think we need to really focus now on things like monitoring and metrics and try and work out, is this delivering value for us or not? Because sure, we can move a lot faster, but if the rework rate is just going up, things like the change failure rate keeps climbing, and we have, we're doing things like exactly, like I mentioned earlier, sort of crunching the idea to value time of things, but the change failure rate's going up steadily. And we have to be monitoring these things and sort of thinking about where the return on investment is being generated, and whether or not we're actually causing ourselves more problems in some cases by going too quickly. So yeah, that's so doubling down on observability and metrics probably is going to be a key thing for lots of companies now.
Yeah, yeah. I guess especially if, let's say, you're in a regulated industry, like, is it worth the trade-off?
Mm.
Introducing some risk to move a little quicker in an industry where you're like massively risk adverse and dealing with like super sensitive information. I've seen that be an area where, people might say that those organizations are lagging behind a little bit, but actually the risk appetite just isn't there. Or, AI is being adopted in different bits of the software development lifecycle, not necessarily in generating the code as such, but maybe in supporting in some of the testing or some monitoring tooling or something like that. One thing that we touched on at the very start, I think Stu, you mentioned it on the sort of opening question, was about the impact on individual roles. So you talked about, I think, impacts to people's jobs essentially. I think it's worth talking about that a little bit. I'd like to dig into your point a little bit more there.
Yeah, I mean, we see this with every new industry change especially in the tech world, right? Where people have to evolve their skills. Everybody's roles evolve gradually over time. And I think, being in the quality space, being a quality professional over the years, we've just had to do this all, like consistently. It's like it doesn't ever feel like there's a sweet spot where you can just go, I'm good now for a little bit. No, it's a continuous evolution. And I think that there's skills that we have as quality professionals that play into this world really nicely. So that critical thinking and being the question asker that people have become accustomed to. But now how you translate that to when you're talking with an LLM, for example, and utilizing that skill set. But I think we've touched on it, in terms of like from a software engineering perspective, like our engineers are becoming more code reviewers than writers, and that takes a different mindset shift, right? And especially if you're a junior engineer, have you got the experience to be a reviewer? And how do we look at that? And I think there's always fear when when new tools, new technologies come in terms of what does this mean for me? And I think that fear is genuinely higher than I've ever seen it right now with from an AI perspective. More so in the case of firstly, how do I not allow this to replace me? Because obviously there is that fear. But I think the other piece is around there's so much potential with it. How do I evolve my skill set to adopt it and embrace it whilst not necessarily knowing how the best way to use something is? So you got to start becoming a bit more experimental. And sometimes that can feel quite scary, right? There's a lot of information out there that people can gain on around, people that are using AI, how to utilize it in one way or another. But I feel like one thing that we need to do as quality professionals is get a lot more comfortable with, our want and desire to embrace AI and utilize it and experiment with it and find not only how does it work, but how does it work best in your context and for what you're doing and for what problem you're trying to solve or your team are trying to solve. And doing that at pace, because it's continuously, there's new features, new opportunities coming all the time. So I think that for me is kind of like the mindset shift there. We've had people that, we talk about manual testing, automation testing, and the people that are manual, and I'm doing the air quotes for any, people that might be interested, but it's all testing. It's just different ways that we go about it. And now AI is thrown in that mix. So it's another case of how do we adopt this and think about that and get comfortable with it? Because it's not going away. We're not going to be able to write it out and it'll disappear. No, we've got to adopt it. We've got to embrace it. We've got to find out the best ways to use it. And I think that for me is something that is going to be it is already proven to be a challenge for some people in our industry from the conversations I'm having.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And we've talked a little bit about like the volume of code being developed has increased significantly, whilst QA/QE capacity within organizations has remained like fairly static, and so more stuff needs testing. And so it's not like there's less stuff that needs testing. And so although AI might have an impact in cutting down some of the amount of work that needs doing, the sort of volume has increased, if you like. So it's finding that sweet spot really as I guess an individual of using AI to have a positive impact in
Exactly.
I guess your like localized productivity, so that you can deal with the increased amount of code coming downstream, and then that's immensely valuable to organizations. James, you got any thoughts on that? Anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a few thoughts on this one. So, yeah, I think a lot of the roles will change to be quite domain focused, and you'll be expected to be that, as a developer who is writing less code, but you will still need to be more critically aware of your own systems as a whole, and think about things from more of an architectural perspective, really. So it's about thinking more about, less about just the one individual microservice you might have been responsible for previously, and now start thinking about integration points, and instead, think about things that, your own work, your own system domain. The AI doesn't have that knowledge necessarily. You can feed it that information. You can try to teach it, but obviously that knowledge needs to be captured. So documentation becomes incredibly important. And I think one of the main things will be, looking at our own architectures, looking at our individual client architectures, making sure that there's enough documented context for AIs to be very useful. And that covers everything from system architecture to coding standards. Everything that you do as an organization now that you want to continue in more of an augmented future, I think needs to be captured and needs to be stored in a central context store. And then when you go to start a new AI-driven project, that information needs to be readily available to that model so that it understands what it should do and what it shouldn't do, and how to work better as a tool for your organization, because each individual organization have a different set of rules, And we all know this if we've consulted before, we've worked at lots of different companies, and they all do things differently. I think having a context store that's really been curated by the people who are doing the jobs, by the business analysts, by the quality engineers, by the developers, all of those people need to be contributing to that document store, which has all of the important things about your business that the AI will need to know in order to really be useful to you. That's going to be a key part of everyone's roles in the next couple of years, is making sure that documentation is really up to scratch.
Yeah. And as we all know,
Not
documentation
always.
is always one of those things that get left by the wayside, which does feed into that organizational maturity piece that we were talking about earlier. So sort of like, we're now talking we sort of shifted, I guess, into talking about, the future. What does the future look like? James, just sort of, you mentioned like spec-driven development and other things like that earlier. So like adding on to what you've just talked about, is there anything else in terms of approaches, processes, tooling, skills that people should be thinking about for like the future?
Sure. So I think a lot of people in quality engineering sort of shifted to, test automation. A lot of manual testers picked up automation skills. I think now a lot of people who've been working in test automation are going to be wanting to pick up AI skills and understanding AI tooling, what would work best in their pipelines, starting to understand the architecture of prompting and how it all works. And yeah, we're going to become a lot of us will be working with configurations a lot of the time, trying to fine tune AI tooling in pipelines to make sure we get the results we expect. I think there'll be a lot of that kind of going around. How do we minimize the human in the loop element while making sure that the code quality is still very high, with the tools that are available, which are going to change and get better. So yeah, I think implementations of AI tooling are going to become a really key thing in lots of SDEP and quality engineer jobs. So yeah, from my side, I think that will be probably a shift in my role as well as many people I know.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. And Stu, anything sort of thinking about future processes, frameworks, approaches from you?
Um, yeah, I mean, I'm going to take it up a level from what James was saying there, but and think more holistically across people understanding the systems more that they're working within and having an appreciation for not just their specific discipline or the squad that they're working in, but how does our entire system come together? And if we adopt AI in this space, what's the impact of doing so? Actually, does the problem, you know, do we really understand the problems we're trying to solve? It may feel like an engineering problem, but actually is it really an engineering problem or is it something else? And if we solve it in engineering, then that can just create issues elsewhere. So I think as teams, as businesses, really understanding more about how our systems interconnect and how we allow work to flow through them and value to flow through them is going to be absolutely critical. And then through that process, you can start building in these quality feedback loops of, like to your point, James, about having that human in the loop. Well, we can, we can automate some of those and those loops and all sorts, but it's making sure we've got that feedback as often as we possibly can, because we need to be able to still make decisions, right?
Yeah.
And if we put the decisions in the AI's hands, guess what? Something goes wrong. You can't say, well, the AI made the decision, right? So, I mean, you could, but people aren't going to stand for that at board level. So, we need to make sure that we're building more quality feedback loops into the systems as we adopt AI, and those things get faster and more efficient and more meaningful, to allow us to still move quickly and maintain quality. And I think that if we do that, if we start there, and then we start doing all the things that we've spoken about, what James was alluding to, and I think that starts setting organizations up for success, if they come at it with that sort of mindset.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's really good. That's really good. Cool. So we are coming up towards the end of today's session, but before we wrap up, I would like let's give some tips and takeaways for the people dialing in. So I'm going to pick on you, James, first. So for the folks dialing in today, if you could give them like one takeaway, one key tip, what would you say?
Um, I'd say I'd say velocity without alignment just means arriving at the wrong destination faster. So it's ensuring that you know what you want to do and that you have your requirements really clear before you go about doing it. That you build a centralized context store for your organization and that you move at a pace that actually works for you and don't try and run before you can walk. Use AI, it's great. It's going to do loads of good things, but be a little bit careful and don't lose the standards that you've gained over years of good software engineering.
Yeah. Okay. No, yeah, that's really good. How about you, Stu?
I echo everything James has just said, so thank you, James. I think the other piece for me is staying connected, thinking about how you stay connected, how you align on AI usage, and having some very clear guidelines and understanding around how you adopt that, where you use it, how you use it, and ensure that that's thought about, throughout your all your processes and feedback loops. Um, but also for me, don't be scared of it. Experiment with it, like James has said. It's hugely beneficial when used in the right way, when you know what you're trying to achieve. It can send you down a rabbit hole when you don't really know what you're trying to achieve, right? So do take time to experiment with it. Don't shy away from it. Utilize resources out there that are, available to people to learn and develop those skills. And the great thing is at the moment, everybody's still learning together. And so you can go onto forums and you can ask any question and you'll get an answer for it. You'll get different people's opinions, which is great. So there's, as I said earlier, I don't believe that there's any experts, real true experts out there at the moment. So everybody's on that learning journey together. So don't be afraid to join that.
Yeah. No, I think that's the thing. Like we're all learning. I'm learning like all of the time. Like these things are emerging. So I think that's a really good point. I think if I was to just say one thing, I'm gonna apologize because I'm stealing it from you, Stu. You said output versus outcome, and I think that really stuck
Mm.
with me because a lot of organizations, and I know there's a very famous chap out there who's talking about lines of code, right? Measuring sort of people's output, productivity based on that. But one line of code is not equal to another line of code, right?
Mm.
And so I think in an organization, if people are talking about those outputs like productivity, token usage, how much code is being generated, how much code is being tested. I think bringing it back to the outcomes, like what we're trying to achieve,
Yeah.
because that's the most important thing, really. So I think that's what I'm going to say. Um, but yeah, so that's pretty much it for today. So thanks, Stu. Thanks, James, for sharing your insights. I learned some stuff. Like it was a really good discussion. For everybody dialing in, hopefully you found this useful and insightful. We will be sharing a copy of this recording and the slides after with a few resources. If you've got any, if this sparks any kind of questions or thoughts after this, do feel free to. I think we'll be sending a follow-up email, like reply on that and sort of ask away. Some of the stuff that James and Stu talked about, we might be able to like point you in the direction of some resource or forum or something there. But again, Stu, James, thanks for your insights today, and thank you everyone for dialing in.
Pleasure. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.